In this video series, we have been fixing Disney's The Rise of Skywalker. We are doing our best to make it a good and proper Star Wars movie through the power of established lore. In part 4, we will look at desert vehicles and being crushed by the weight of the lore, or perhaps even the exact opposite, R2 Disney's USB port, and performing a droid loretopsy to find out where one might actually insert a plug. Irreversibly breaking space, and then putting on the brakes to reverse that change, even if it means confronting the devil himself.
An analysis of the plans provided by Princess Leia has demonstrated a weakness. The approach will not be easy. You're required to maneuver straight down this trench and skim the surface to this point. A precise hit will start a chain reaction which should destroy the station. Only a precise hit will set up a chain reaction.
Why did you have to be so brave? Oh, they fly now!
Excuse me?
They fly now!
What was that?
They fly now!
Can you say that again?
They fly now!
I'm not quite sure I heard you.
They fly now!
Would you mind repeating the same words another few dozen times? This dialogue is silly. Is it meant to be a joke? I'm not laughing, and the characters aren't laughing. This is no laughing matter. But if we assume this is meant to be serious, the tone is completely wrong. Perhaps this is supposed to be comic relief, instead of just failed comedy. Comic relief is a traditional part of Star Wars, a moment of levity to enhance seriousness. Think of Jar Jar and 3PO, they allow the rest of the movie to stay serious.
Hello, boyos.
Shield generator's been hit!
How woo!
It's about managing the emotions of the audience to stop them from getting desensitized to the Star War. The scene starts with hot wiring a pair of ramshackle landspeeders.
We've spotted the fugitives.
Then, the duck troopers arrive on their own vehicles. This is the infamous, tread speeder? This is okay, I might enjoy riding one of them myself, but you have to ask yourself what the point of the tracks is.
Bad guys are on these kind of weird motorcycle skidoo things.
Tracks are good over moderately rough terrain where wheels can't go. Because the weight is spread out, ground pressure is lower than with wheels or legs. That would be an argument for using continuous track on a sand planet to avoid sinking into dunes. The downside of tracks is extra maintenance and a lower top speed. This seems like a solid set of arguments to make tracked bikes. However, this is Star Wars. We've definitely seen tracked vehicles, but you can't exactly drag race a sandcrawler. There is one other option that Earth doesn't have: repulsor lifts. We've seen Luke's landspeeder, Jabba's sail barge, and Scout Trooper speeder bikes. Almost every advantage to tracks is trumped by repulsors. Terrain doesn't matter until it's as tall as the hover ceiling, completely bypassed. Ground pressure is non-existent. We don't see sand reacting to the weight floating above it. Further evidence comes from Jar Jar Binks' introduction. Qui-Gon tackles them to the ground and an MTT transport floats over the pair. We see air blowing from the cooling exhaust, but these are repulsor craft, not hovercraft. The weight must be transferred directly to the world's gravity well, not to the ground underneath. The multi-troop transport is extremely heavy, most of it is armor and repulsors. We'd expect Qui-Gon to be crushed if ground pressure applied underneath repulsor craft. All repulsor lifts have one very simple limitation to their use: a gravity well to push off is necessary. Though, as we can see, the ITO interrogator droid can hover inside the Death Star, which clearly has artificial gravity. So the same repulsors that allow it to float on a planet must also work when exposed to the equivalent artificial gravity. Most people pay no attention to the artificial gravity. We know at least 62% of all films are shot on Earth, so we're not surprised by gravity staying 1G in all the footage. It also turns out that tracks can be a vulnerability. The First Order looked at a hoverbike and intentionally replaced it with this. Why is the continuous track offset so far to the front? Traditionally, tanks and bulldozers have their tracks underneath instead of this position. Moving the track underneath would make it far safer. Alternatively, extending a thin armor shroud over the exposed track would have saved this bike. When this grapple attempt happens, we're meant to think of T-47 versus AT-AT.
One more pass. Coming around. Watch me.
Instead, I'm reminded of the 74Z speeder bikes from back in the Star Wars universe. They have exposed steering vanes which could be tangled as easily as tracks can. Still, they chose to show a kind of failure that the OT design was immune to. What else am I supposed to conclude about this vehicle? There is one Star Wars advantage to tracks. As you may remember, shields can be bypassed by a grounding connection. If there were a planetary shield in use, a tracked vehicle could pass right through. In that one scenario, tread speeders would be superior to hovering speeder bikes. Of course, JJ can't use that, because he later declares that shields don't work in atmosphere. Also, our new heroes are on repulsor craft, so they'd be stopped by a shield. If I were consulted on this, and couldn't change much of the scene, I'd alter course. Show the terrain as being something suited for tracks over repulsors. What might that look like? Well, look at Luke's X-34 landspeeder. It has 3 turbine engines, making their distinctive high-pitched whine.
Hit the accelerator.
These are like the propulsion fan in an airboat. They provide only thrust. Keeping the machine up is buoyancy or repulsors, a completely unrelated principle. I bet these are weak to hills. I'm quite fond of Darth Maul's speeder bike. It's something different from the Scout Troopers in Episode 6, but still believable. My physical reference on it is from 2012, right before the reboot line. The make and model are Razalon FC20. Apparently the bike is named the Bloodfin, which sounds about right. His Sith infiltrator is identified as the Scimitar. We also see him ride the bike off a cliff. It immediately drops down and continues at the same height above the ground as before. This proves land speeders have a hover ceiling, tuned to be quite low to the surface. The Empire's 74Z bikes top out at 25 meters. The sail barge was the best Jabba could afford and could achieve 10 meters. Like the MTT, the sail barge can use repulsor lifts for propulsion. Though there is a small green thruster visible, that's true of Maul's bike as well. Luke's Incom T-16 Skyhopper is an air speeder instead. We all know that a T-16 has similar controls to an Incom T-65 X-Wing, or a T-47 Snowspeeder. Skyhopper repulsor lifts can reach 300 kilometers up. It wouldn't make sense that its altitude changes just because Beggar's Canyon happened to be underneath. I have to conclude that on a hill, a land speeder will strain its repulsors more from trying to keep itself level without touching the ground, and that going uphill will put more work on the thrust turbines, whereas to a bike with wheels or tracks, hills are no big deal. Okay, now, on a desert planet covered in sand, can anyone think where some hills might be? This brings us to the only other feature of JJ's tracked bike. The toy will come with a spring, so it can launch your action figures across the room. On a chase over perfectly flat ground, it's no real advantage. Suppose the chase actually took place across a field of sand dunes. If the goodies have any head start, they might be hidden from the baddies. Now the man catapult comes in. Take the trooper riding pillion, use the bike to launch him into the air. Now he can see exactly where the prey is, and relay that back to all the bike teams. Suddenly, I'm no longer confused about whether this scene is comedy or not. This is a sensible tactic for the situation. It makes you think the stormtroopers have done this before, or at least have thought about it. You could even play it for laughs. Boing, there's a falling sand trooper. Then it dawns on our heroes that while we laugh at their antics, vision goes both ways. The snarl of bike engines drifts over the dunes, and the soldiers sweep in from all directions. Look at how easy that was, how the scene writes itself for you. The lore partially controls your actions, but it also obeys your commands. Our established lore tells you the will of the canon. When you learn to quiet your mind, you'll hear it speaking to you. As soon as you set up the premise, We know Imperial forces should want to fight in the dunes. I've already gone on for longer than the chase scene, so it's time for this.
They fly now!
Only now will I allow them to fly. I have no problem with flying stormtroopers. In fact, I would immediately interrogate JJ for the specifications. Look, matey, I can accomplish that for you in at least 3 distinct ways. You've got to consider these things. Wait, no, there's 4 or 5 ways. What are the existing Star Wars options? In one hand there's a jetpack, on the other hand there's a rocket pack, and on the final front hand there are still repulsor lifts. I'll explain the implications of each, but there are 2 exotic options. One would be wings, presumably a mechanical set more like insect than bat or bird wings. Another would be lifting gas, inflating 1 or more balloons from a backpack tank. These 2 are probably more trouble than they're worth. Let's start with the rocket pack. These are powerful, and they just work. Doesn't matter if you're on Hoth or Dagobah or in a Sarlacc, the rocket pack is your reliable companion. The Old Republic used rocket jumper troopers a few thousand years ago. Bit thirsty on the fuel consumption, so you can't run it for ages. Just like 20th century Earth rockets, they carry all the fuel and oxidizer needed. A rocket pack doesn't care if it's underwater, in vacuum, or if the air is pure nitrogen. The other main option are jetpacks. These are a bit simpler, cheaper, and more compact than rocket packs. These have air intakes, so only tanks of fuel are needed. This means jetpacks can only work in a breathable atmosphere. Personally, I spend a lot of time in breathable atmospheres, so jets will do fine. Boba Fett and I happen to agree on this one. Jango Fett used much the same model, but with a different missile attached. Finally, repulsor packs. If you think jetpacks are cool, you probably won't like these. The key factor is speed, which a repulsor pack can't give you.
He is not ready to be given this assignment on his own yet.
The Council is confident in its decision, Obi-Wan.
The boy has exceptional skills.
With a small man-portable flight pack, it's all a trade-off. Repulsors give you the ability to linger effortlessly for hours at a time. They're also more precise in their movement, more agile and controllable. So, not much use in combat, but very practical. You might bring a repulsor pack with you to any number of jobs, but a jetpack is more of a hobby item. The ideal solution would be to combine the 2 technologies into a hybrid pack. It will be bulky, there's no getting around that. With the repulsor to keep you aloft and the jets giving a speed boost, it's the best of both options. Anything a jetpack can do, the hybrid can do better. Except being able to face sideways and walk through a door.
Ow! That hurts! Bend down, you thoughtless... Ow!
The hybrid's probably not what the Empire would pick though. They'd most likely go for a jetpack, which is what appears to happen in the movie. Verdict? They fly now is absolutely fine. The flying part anyway. The vehicles and use of terrain? Abysmal. It's less like a car chase, more of a... well, it was genuinely filmed on rails.
What we're doing is we're building a track. We're building 2 in fact. One's going to be a camera track and one's going to be a vehicle track.
No wonder it looks like the whole sequence is a linear track directly from plot point L to K. That'll do for the desert.
I thought that hairy beast would be the end of me. Of course I've looked better.
At the start of JJ's movie, the Millennium Falcon docks with a building. They string a cable between the 2 rooms, send some data through it, then disconnect and go on their merry way.
Win the war!
There are several things to like about this scene. It reminds me of mid-air refueling, which is perhaps the most interesting thing you can do in flight. Also, let's appreciate the prop they used. Look at the girth, imagine how well shielded the wiring is. This is great, it's exactly the sort of thing one could easily miss imagining. The wires used in Star Wars are not, and will never have been, something you can buy on Earth. It'd look and feel wrong if they matched the wires going to your Earth modem. However, even with how much I love the main prop used in this scene, it's hilarious. Look at what JJ does with this, and compare it to actual Star Wars. There are some horizontal stripes on R2, and JJ decides they are dust covers for the macro USB ports. You may remember that R2 is connected to several things. Here is the most important one, sharing the Death Star plans with the Rebellion. Another nice cable plugged into somewhere on the right of R2's torso. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be anything in that location. All we can see is a large vertical panel with no indication of what's behind it. This is not what JJ used. There are also two tools R2 uses for computer interfaces. These only work on a fixed wall socket. I can't imagine a cable adapter working. Would the spinny bit need to spin on the far end of the wire too? This one fits a power outlet. Perfectly reasonable. Earth guitar jacks aren't far off the size of some mains power pins. We can clearly see where these two extend from. This also lines up with the documentation. It has a long compartment on the right listed as the computer interface arms. Luke attaches some equipment to a small panel in the center right.
Let's see now. There you go.
Obviously, a gonk droid would be better to power equipment, but they're heavy. Power droids have thicker armor than most battle droids, and a few ships. Most power droids are either the EG-6 or Industrial Automaton's GNK. They're designed to be extremely safe. These coolant vents are working as intended. With one of these, you have a fusion-powered traction engine. As long as you're not running industrial or military equipment, a gonk droid will cover it all.
Stay and watch after the camp.
But you all know the advertising campaign for the revolutionary new series of R2 units. No job is over this little guy's head. It's funny because they're short. You know, sometimes I abuse even myself.
That doesn't sound too hard.
There's a circular saw down in the center left panel. Not relevant except to eliminate the hatch. There's a shock probe opposite in the same place Luke connected a power lead. Effective against Ewoks, Salacious Crumb, and chains for some reason. Another zapper here under one of the top panels, used against a droid outside the astromech socket. Again, no relevance.
Now, where are you taking me?
Next, let's move on to manipulator arms. We know there's one here in the head, used during the trench run. One here from the vertical slot on the far left of the torso, used against Yoda.
R2, let him have it.
That seems to be a heavy-duty arm. Another one up the central hatch, as seen serving drinks aboard the sail barge. Hang on, I've just remembered something. We've seen R2 use an arm to operate something a long time ago in a Corellian corvette.
Hey, you're not permitted in there. It's restricted. You'll be deactivated for sure.
This is the arm used to open the escape pod. But look at it. That's not a very good arm, is it? I choose to believe that these are the covers for a pair of arms, not the arms themselves. Though it would make sense to have the covers function as an extra pair of rudimentary arms. These are the main arms used when in a starfighter's astromech socket. Either way, we know this isn't where you'd find an astromech's serial ports.
You can't. How would you know the hyperdrive is deactivated?
I've already shown options for data input, but there's one more thing. At the end of the recorded message, Leia inserts the plans into R2.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
The way to do this would be to reference that pivotal scene. Take a close look at the radar eye. See the slot underneath it? Well, that's where the Death Star plans were inserted. We don't see much of the storage medium that held the Death Star plans. We do know the Empire called them data tapes, but it's hard to imagine a tape cassette fitting in that slot. Clearly, they've also dropped support for compact flash. No, this slot is for data cards. Come to think of it, does Leia's data card predate Earth's memory cards? Star Trek gets a lot of credit for predicting cell phones in the communicator and tricorder. Convenient data storage has been part of Star Wars since the first minutes.
Look! Get him off of that!
Right, it is time. To explain JJ, I must invoke RJ. In Disney Wars 9, there are several references. These only make sense in the context of Disney Wars 8. That movie, The Last Jedi, is famously controversial. Of the Disney trilogy, the middle movie was helmed by another bloke. He has many names, and the majority are impolite. Perhaps the least offensive is Roundhead, and in some circles his name is a curse. When something has been defiled and disrespected, we say it has been Johnsoned.
Hello, I'm Ryan Johnson, and he's looking right into the camera lens, right here. Look at those eyes. Never do this if you're in a movie.
We dare not utter its true name. Henceforth, the demon shall be known only by the initials RJ. I had planned to completely skip covering TLJ in this series, to ignore it entirely, fixing only 7 and 9, the ones captained by a Mr. J.J. Abrams. However, JJ's hand was forced by the entity known as RJ.
A Jedi's weapon deserves more respect.
At face value, this saber-catching scene should have its own criticisms, but this scene only exists to undo this TLJ one. It doesn't have a purpose of its own. This here is a very strange and unsatisfactory thing to say.
We need to put some holdo maneuvers, do some real damage.
Come on, that move is 1 in a million.
Par for the course with JJ, but he didn't have a lot to work with. This is a terrible explanation, and what JJ struggles to explain is equally terrible.
And that your anger with Solo must be equally powerful.
The holdo maneuver is not a neat trick like the Picard maneuver. Holdo is the name of someone else's Death Star shotgun. RJ did this. Kablow! People tell me it looks pretty, but I just don't see it. Since I don't want to talk about this movie yet, we'll keep it abstract. To holdo is to try ramming something while firing up the hyperdrive. I didn't want to explain what's wrong with this yet. It's not time. All you need to know is that it isn't how hyperspace works, at all. No wiggle room, no 1 in a million chance. This cannot happen in Star Wars. It's time to tell you all about the Shadows. No, not Cliff Richard Jr.'s band. Jakar, get that book out of here.
The Book of Jaquan. Read it. We'll talk afterward.
I don't read Narn.
Learn!
There's hyperspace, and then there's real space. They aren't completely isolated from each other. Hyperspace is full of shadows, mass shadows. A star casts a mass shadow into hyperspace, meaning you can't fly into that area. What happens if you jump to light speed on a bad course? Well, nothing. Most likely whatever you hit won't even be able to tell. The ship in hyperspace, though, that just ceases to exist. Which means RJ's spiffing wheeze is already right out. My barrel of lore is nowhere near empty, so let's keep going. Another feature of hyperspace comes from Empire Strikes Back. Vader demands to know where the Falcon has gone, from last known trajectory.
Lord Vader, our ships have completed their scan of the area and found nothing. If the Millennium Falcon went into light speed, it would be on the other side of the galaxy by now.
Alert all commands. Calculate every possible destination along the last known trajectory.
Darth Vader is nobody's fool. If Han could escape by just steering a little to the left, Vader's plan wouldn't work. In hyperspace, your course is fixed. That's why the Never computer needs to calculate before jumping.
Traveling through hyperspacing like dust and crops, boy. Without precise calculations, we'd fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova and then it end your trip real quick, wouldn't we?
If you could dodge supernova mass shadows as you come to them, you wouldn't need to pre-calculate. The interesting part is how JJ responds.
Lisa, think of something.
Hands up.
Left to make a sequel after something impossible happens, JJ gives up.
I give up. I give up.
Throws up his hands in despair and accepts that the universe has been broken. Then he tries to make the best of the broken world. JJ reckons that this gives him the ability to get away with literally anything.
Don't do that again.
While TLJ draws the fire, nobody cares that JJ has done worse. Trying to top the holdo fiasco, JJ comes up with what he calls lightspeed skimming.
What are you doing? Lightspeed skipping!
This isn't like the 40k lore about the Tau hyperdrive, where Tau have to make slow, shallow jumps through the warp because they aren't psychic. JJ just wanted to flash up a sequence of cool environments in the first few minutes. to capture the audience's attention. JJ declares that if you wiggle the hyperdrive controls, you can pop in and out of hyperspace rapidly. What's wrong with this one? It isn't how hyperspace works. There is no element of chance. This cannot happen in Star Wars either. First of all, even if it was possible, you wouldn't try it in the Millennium Falcon. The fastest hyperdrive in the galaxy is the Falcon's. In hyperspace, it has the unique ability to outrun any ship. The famously cool SR-71 missile countermeasure of "just go faster" applies. 0.5 past lightspeed means literally nobody else in the galaxy can possibly keep up. The trade-off is that the Falcon's hyperdrive is brittle. It takes constant maintenance and is prone to breaking down. It's like having Thrust 2 disguised as a station wagon. Are we supposed to believe you can flick the engines on and off willy-nilly? The hyperdrive has a few moments of warning while the calculations are made, then operates steadily for hours at a time. You wouldn't treat a light bulb like this, then pretend to be surprised when the bulb blows. Rapid cycling is a rough treatment for most machinery. So, if the Falcon was real, it wouldn't stand up to this kind of abuse. There's an intricate hyperdrive on the end of those levers. It isn't magically tied to the control's position. But this is the debatable part. One could argue against the maintenance constraints. The part that was Johnsoned isn't so forgiving. Remember the Eclipse, the enormous Star Destroyer? It's time to introduce an older relative, the Immobilizer 418. This one is tiny for a Star Destroyer. Even the small Victory class are half as long again. More commonly known as the Interdictor, they are only 600 meters long and extremely specialized. You wouldn't find an interdictor in atmosphere. That would defeat the purpose of the ship. These bulbous protrusions are the whole reason the ship exists. The Eclipse happened to have gravity well generators in addition to the super laser. Interdictors are built around a grav well array. Their role is as a mobile hyperspace inhibitor. When the grav wells are running, all nearby ships are blocked from making a jump to lightspeed.
Let's get out of here. Ready for lightspeed? 1, 2, 3. It's not fair.
More concerning, an interdictor can even pull ships out of hyperspace. Within its area of effect, the hyperdrive cannot possibly prevent you from dropping into real space. Be they natural or artificial, a gravity well completely counters an attempt to use hyperdrives.
No light speed. It's not my fault.
You've probably already figured out the issue for JJ. He wants a pretty vista, so he shows jumping in and out just above planetary surfaces. This is laughably wrong. It isn't risky, it's flat out impossible within Star Wars. The only excuse JJ has is, "But Mum, RJ broke the hyperdrive law first."
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Who's the more foolish, the RJ or the JJ who follows him?
Locked on target.
This scene is absolutely brimming over with the wrong ability. There's one other huge mistake. What's the excuse for breaking the law? Well, our heroes are being chased by TIE fighters. That's fine. I'd go so far as to say it's a good idea. We know all about TIE fighters, what they can and can't do. A chase through hyperspace is a perfect example of something TIEs can't do. The TIE gets its name from the twin ion engine drive system. A marvel of Imperial engineering, few ships can rival the TIE. A TIE fighter is agile and extremely fast. Only the A-Wing interceptors can outrun a bog-standard TIE of the line. A lot was sacrificed in the trade-off for extreme speed. TIEs are short-range fighters. You can't fly one across the galaxy.
No, it's a short-range fighter.
There aren't any bases around here. Where did it come from?
The absolute limit for onboard supplies is 2 days, or a few hours of combat.
A fighter that size couldn't get this deep into space on its own.
Yeah, he must have gotten lost, been part of a convoy or something.
Well, he ain't gonna be around long enough to tell anybody about us.
Look at him, he's heading for that small moon.
Partly, this is because TIEs sacrifice life support, of all things.
Yes, sir.
A TIE pilot wears a sealed spacesuit, otherwise he'd be dead instantly from the unpressurized cockpit. The other huge sacrifice? Well, TIEs do not have a hyperdrive or shields. Only the TIE Advanced X-1, as used by Vader, had a hyperdrive. One could argue that JJ has shown a new model of TIE, that the First Order abandoned the TIE design philosophy turning it into a copy of the X-Wing. All the advantages of a TIE discarded to make a heavier, slower, mediocre starfighter.
That droid has a map that leads straight to Luke Skywalker. Oh, you gotta be kidding me!
That would be incorrect, though. The real reason is that JJ never knew anything about TIE fighters. They make a cool noise, they're used by the Empire, and JJ's knowledge stops at that. It was never JJ's intention to depict a new type of TIE. He didn't mean to add life support and hyperdrives to them. He never knew the first thing about TIEs.
It's very complicated.
One of the most prominent ships in the saga, and JJ couldn't be bothered to look up a single characteristic. If anyone in the film crew pointed out what was wrong, they were completely ignored. These kind of accidental changes are typical of Disney Wars.
Representative Binks, I know I can count on you.
Misa honored to be taking on this heavy burden. Misa accept this with more humility.
To be fair, X-Wings are good starfighters. In the Star Wars universe, the Empire did indeed try their own take on an Alliance-style starfighter, the TIE Defender. It was designed to retain the speed and agility that make the TIE series so remarkable. Contrast this with the TIE Interceptor, designed to be a better example of the normal TIE principles.
Got it.
The Interceptor is more agile than an X-Wing and nearly as fast as an A-Wing. The Defender is superior to the Interceptor on both counts. Of course, they still don't have life support, and only the Defender has a hyperdrive. Because of the sheer cost of building one, the Defender never made it past the prototype phase. Now, let's fix JJ's mess. He wants rapid-fire scenes of rebel ships being chased by Imperial forces. This light-speed skimming is not an option, but that's fine because we have a relevant film technique. To use it, we need there to be more than one spaceship in the entire galaxy. It is my official judgment as a Star Wars expert that there are several ships in the galaxy. Choice.
He agrees.
To show the spectacular vistas, we call upon the montage. Instead of dropping the Falcon into a new world every few seconds, use film techniques. A montage is several short scenes in rapid succession, which is exactly JJ's goal. The only change needed is to show a different ship each time. This ice planet can be the Falcon, this other one can be the Tantive 4, the next to be a couple of X-Wings, etc. This has two main advantages. First, it isn't impossible, can't emphasize enough how important that is. Second, it makes the galaxy look bigger. Remember how in Empire Strikes Back, the Falcon goes one way and Luke goes another? There are countless people having their own adventures, all the time. JJ wants to show several places quickly. That's fine. There are very few constraints upon you. You can use the power of the montage to show the same ship in different places. To show them rapidly, you can skip the travel time getting from one to another. Alternatively, you can show different ships and people at the same time. By skipping from place to place, you aren't forced to increment the calendar. The one thing you cannot do is to have it all happen in real time. It isn't possible for a ship to go from one planet to another in seconds. It takes a lot of effort to get it this wrong, this thoroughly. You have to deliberately ignore a lot of warning signs, a lot of canon. YouTube isn't like maintaining the Falcon's hyperdrive. Do the like, bell icon and subscribe thing. It's easy, and it normally works as intended. It's the kind of thing that is easy for someone who is going to leave a comment. You are going to leave a comment, right? We wouldn't like to think you are one of those anti-algorithm people. The Empire has laws against those types of people. Good news about the Jurek board. We got it back. We had to dig it out of... well, that doesn't matter right now, does it? We got it back and it was only mildly traumatizing. The best kind of traumatizing.
Da
he heard you the first time!
What, you think you're some kind of Jedi waving your hand around like that? I'm a Toydarian. Mind tricks don't work on me. Only money. No money, no parts, no deal.